Ta-da.
And we're live. Let's see if he was paying attention. There he is.
There we go. Only when the boss is here. Okay. All right, good evening, everyone. February 23rd, 2016 Fincom meeting. Tonight we're going to start off with the illustrious Kirby Dolak, giving us some ideas about the new technology available to us and other boards. And got some budget updates. And we're going to talk about the financial policies and procedures update, hopefully vote on that, if everybody's all set for that one tonight. Start talking about the warrants coming down, and in minutes. So, with that, we'll start with Mr. Dolak, please.
Kirby, please.
Kirby, please, okay.
Miss Betsy. Good evening. Thank you for having me in. The purpose for my visit this evening is very simple. What I wanted to do is to take some time to explain the new technology that was approved last November and was finished being installed and commissioned at the beginning of February. It was an interesting time and opportunity for us to learn some new things. Ms. Carrozza's young man helped me with some Linux programming at one point in time. Ms. Bowling, I'm sorry.
Nobody's going to know who you're talking about.
Yeah, really. All right, so what we want to do is one, show you the new town video on demand site, for one, but also to talk about what the new technology will allow you to do for outreach, to communicate about topics, events, information that the town needs to know about. And also to provide a platform that Fincom members can use to educate and prepare the public about things that are happening at an upcoming meeting, at your annual budget meeting, what you're doing, why you're doing it, things along that line. And the tech came at a cost. You know, there were some dollars and cents. And this particular technology gives us a lot more functionality and feature set. And we're spending more time feeding it, grooming it, if you want to call it that, because we have the capability now to broadcast and on a different channel. We now have the education channel. But the new technology allows us to create what I will call small programs. Programs that can be 3 minutes to 5 minutes, under a half an hour, under 15 minutes. What does that do? That allows the committees and the boards, and basically anybody in Littleton, who wants to talk about events that are occurring or get information out there, they can actually come in, tape a segment, and then we can air that. And we can do that on a repetitive basis. We can do it on a specific day. We can do it on a specific hour. We can do it that it coordinates before your Fincom meeting if you guys created a PSA about what's happening as a topic, so that you wanted to tell the Littleton public about what's happening, to get them in and watching or in the seats here, that's available. But as I mentioned about cost, that means that you folks have to become more involved in that process, where you come in and as a rep of Fincom, talk about that particular piece. And so that takes a little bit more time than just you're coming to meetings and attending other groups' meetings. So the new features and functionality come at that additional cost in your time to do it. So with that, what I wanted to do was to show you here the new on-demand site. If you folks haven't been on, how many have been up on it so far? Okay, very good. Now the way this is organized, if I can draw your attention to either one of the two screens, is you'll notice the LCTV logo, and you'll notice that there's recent programs, live, and scheduled. Recent are basically the programs that have been uploaded from the playback server, or New Gear, onto the video on demand. And so you can look at that using the recent bar, or you can go into the programs and you can scroll across the top there, and let's find our favorite committee here. Oh, look at that. And so as a result, when I clicked on that, you notice there's a little page mark or arrows there, and I can take a look and see what latest editions of Fincom are out there. And if I really wanted to, I could bring up one and actually play it. Now the other thing that's brand new to the environment is the live function and looking at the government. Let's see if we can get this up and run for us. That would be the nice little thing. Come on.
Rule when you do demos, you know.
Yeah, it's always, well, I worked it out this morning, this afternoon, and it was supposed to be working fine. But now it's being nasty to me. All right. Well, I was going to show you your own live program going on right now, but it looks as if I actually have a sub-instance of the program running, which is even more interesting. But long and short of it is in the live environment, we can actually show you what's there. And in all the government or the scheduling, for instance, we can go through the various days of the week and show you what's showing on the government channel as well as the education or the public channels. And for instance, again, we'll try this again and see whether or not it's going to visit us or not. I'm going to have to double check to see whether or not we're airing properly on this channel. But this provides you the capability that if you're a board member and you're traveling, but you still want to tune in to what's going on at the Fincom, that you can do that as well. Bonnie and I have had a brief conversation, and also with Diane Corey, about what it means to vote or allow for indirect participation and voting using the live technology. And as we found out, you have to have at least a quorum, but once that quorum is available, then other members who can't physically be here because they're traveling can dial into your phone and actually be watching what's occurring. But of course, that has to be voted on by the selectmen.
They can vote remotely like that, then?
As long as you have a quorum present.
As long as you have
Is that
a
right?
quorum present.
But you can count their votes.
As long as the selectmen have approved of it.
Right.
Wasn't going to go too far down that one,
Okay.
but just showing you some of the new functionality that is available. The other thing too is, the one thing that I do since I'm the contractor boss, as Betsy mentioned before, is that I can also, when I'm home now, watch what's occurring inside of Littleton On Demand. Because, I don't know whether you folks can see it, my small screen, but the same thing you have up on your screen is the same thing that's here. And it's been a couple of meetings so far that have been running rather late, and I'll just put this on bed, and I'll be listening with my headset, making certain everything's okay.
So is there an app for that?
It's just Chrome,
I was just
your browser.
Okay.
And if you point it at the town hall to the LCTV On Demand, you've got it.
Interesting.
So that's some new functionality. This is the tech I wanted to show you, that you had the capability of looking at what's available on all three of the channels, take a look at what programs are available at the upper level, to understand about the collapsing of the pages there, so you can see what might be available for the Littleton Middle School, for instance. Yeah, I think my app's been frozen on my iPad. But the nice thing for me personally is that I was doing some video work for the Board of Selectmen in Boxborough the other day. At the same time, the Board of Selectmen was going on here, and I was able to keep tabs on what was going on over here at the deeper level, but anybody can watch it from home.
So the next time Marilyn goes to Zimbabwe on safari, she can take minutes of our meeting.
Yeah, she could, but I can guarantee you
That
right
works.
now that Zimbabwe's Ethernet connections, from personal experience, don't work. Don't work.
Well, hey,
So, there was a list of a bunch of ideas that I had just rambled on about, and I'm not going to go down through them. But what I'd like to have you folks do is sort of a bit of homework, is to think about what the technology might allow you to do to communicate specific topics about upcoming events that are occurring in meetings, where it would be worthwhile doing a 3 to 5 minute PSA or something along that line that we can air a week, 2 weeks before your next meeting.
Yep.
And let's get some seats filled and increase the viewership, for instance, and allow for your outreach mission as far as communication, because I view your group not only keeping us on a stable, even keel, short-term and long-term, but there are a lot of complicated issues that are coming up, and people need to understand what it means to be above or below the levee, or inside or outside. And it's very obvious, at least me personally, that when we get to town meeting, some of the folks don't have all the story even as well as we try and communicate to them. So, great opportunities for communication. That's about what I had to tell you, unless you have some questions. Feel free to stop in the studio, even if you aren't working on the diner, Steve, and we'll show you a little bit more about the tech if you're interested. So, any questions?
Great.
I think this is going to make the seats more empty than fill them.
Well, you can look at it that way. You can look at it that way.
People are going to watch from home.
But it, you know, you've had that capability
How much
to
more
watch
empty can
live,
you get?
Greg, for a while.
It's true.
So if anything, I'm hopeful that, you know, if we can reach out a little bit more to people and let them know what's going on, that, you know, we might get some more conversations going.
Do you have the ability to track the viewership?
Yes, the on-demand viewership we can.
But if,
Unfortunately for the Comcast and Verizon users, they are very close-mouthed about what and how things are being done.
They
won't give us
won't even
the-
give you counts?
No,
Really?
no.
They'll give you subscriber numbers, that's it.
Yep. Yep. So the video on demand statistics, we're just learning a little bit about is through Google Analytics, and it will hopefully allow us to track down to the country of origin that they're watching. In fact, when I was setting up my Google account, I was telling one of the folks that all of a sudden I had somebody come in from Uganda. And I'm like, what are you doing here? So I had somebody that tried to hack the account.
oh, wow.
All right, anything else I can help you folks with?
How many people, for the ones that you can track?
Well, I'll give you
Yeah.
right, for instance, since we turned on the page count, because there was a little hiccup on the code side, I would have to say that our TNN, the senior high school's viewership, is probably the highest on a daily rate. You can average anywhere between 30 plus views, depending on what day it is. And then, of course, when Littleton Common comes out for its next showing, then viewership goes up on that tremendously.
It's my wife's program.
Right, right. And it's the same thing with any of the other locally produced
Well, like the Board of
programs.
Selectmen, how many people can you see that download that or? look at that?
Yeah, I don't really have a lot of history on those yet,
Okay.
Bonnie, because we're still working through the Google Analytics piece of it. But I can tell you, you know, without a doubt, that a lot of our hits in the past have been around planning board.
Because they're more exciting meetings.
Well, you know, you can put it any different way you do, it, and it's great for the ratings, so to speak.
Yeah.
But no, what we normally
Somebody run
find
for
is
president on that
that
platform,
the
yeah.
selectmen, depending upon what's being presented that's contentious, there may be a lot of views of the previous showing or previous program in preparation for the next meeting, and then it spikes again the time that they're watching it till the next day or two. Did you see what that
Right.
so-and-so did? And so, you know, there's some thrill-seeking there that goes along with it.
It's me interested. I mean, I know people watch them. I'm amazed how many people say, I saw you or something like
Right,
that.
right.
So I'm just curious, the number 20 or 200 or what, you know?
Yeah,
It's
I'm
amazing.
hoping that as this technology catches on, that more folks will do live, the live piece of it. You know, similar to what was done before, but now that, since it's on and available on a lot more platforms, it's a lot easier to get into.
It's definitely helpful for me where I travel a fair amount of
6,000
time.
registered voters.
It's great.
Yeah, so, and this is the first real app that allows you to be in 3 places at once. You can have 3 live shows up and bounce between them,
Okay.
okay?
So is Bill Vale still doing his science?
Oh, gosh, yes.
Is he?
He does
I haven't
In Your
been on in a
Backyard, Fun with Science, Littleton Rocks, and Carol Vale's just started a new program called Cooking with, well, it's not Carol, I can't remember, she has a name that she goes by her grandkids.
Pseudonym?
No, it's a name their grandkids gave her, so we just started that one up at Hunter Appliance. So there's a lot of great producing being done locally, and we're lucky to have a lot of the good people we do. Okay, anything else?
Great.
Happy to come back and talk to you, or if you want to stop by, send me an email. That's what we're here for. Okay?
Right.
Thank you
All
very
right,
much.
cook more than
Very
we're
much.
supposed to.
Nice work.
Good, thank you. I'm sure Apple will help you get in through the back door to
That's
fix
right.
your
I could get you right in there.
Oh, beautiful.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, you want to talk about budget? You want to talk about snow and ice
Sure.
first?
I'll start with snow and ice since that's the most recent development. But it's basically that time of year where I need to ask both the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee authorization to go into the budgeted deficit that we plan for snow and ice removal. As of last week, we haven't posted the warrant yet this week, but as of last week, we had processed bills totaling about $142,000. And I know we have more outstanding coming in for salt and other supplies and payroll. You might remember that we budget snow and ice in the amount of $650,000. We plan for it by way of an appropriation for $200,000, and then we budget a deficit of $450,000. People ask all the time, why don't you just budget $650,000, and why do you do it this way? Once you budget an appropriation, you cannot reduce it, or you lose the ability to deficit spend. So you always want to budget what you know you're going to spend at a minimum, and then the deficit you plan for what you might spend at the outside limit. If you don't spend the deficit, you can appropriate that at a later town meeting, once you know. So that's why it's broken up like that. I get asked pretty regularly, why don't you just throw it all in a budget? So I would argue that it is budgeted, it's planned. We have done this for 10-plus years.
But it's, the state says you can deficit spend that one account, right?
Right.
Where they could just say, you can reallocate that money if you don't use it. It would have
Right.
the same
And then we
effect,
do the
right?
same thing,
It's not
yes.
like everybody does this, so it's
Right.
the
The
same.
shell game.
That's right.
Yes. So there is a rationale behind it. This gives us the most flexibility in allocating dollars in the future. So the Board of Selectmen did vote to approve the authorization to deficit spend, and I did provide the cover sheet that they had. The motion, you could use the same motion and just substitute the Finance Committee instead of Board of Selectmen.
So you need us to approve this as well?
Yep, both. It's
Yep,
required.
both have to-
Now,
both have to approve it to allow her to spend
Okay.
it.
there is a proposed amendment to the general laws in next year, for next year. I don't know if it's going to pass or not, but to eliminate this requirement, there are a lot of communities, it is a requirement under the law, but there's a lot of communities that don't do it, and there's no monitoring for it. I don't have to submit anything saying that I've received the vote. So I'll let you know if that happens, but
So this is an approval to dip into that deficit
Yes.
account. There's no dollar amount at this point.
no, I haven't posted anything into it yet, but I know I will be in the next week, so.
How are we doing as far as projections so far for the budget? Are we at where we thought we'd be, or are we way below, or?
For snow and ice?
Yeah.
Well, compared to last year, it will look great.
Last year was an anomaly, but compared to most years.
Compared to most years, we're under a little bit.
We're under a little bit?
Usually, I'm before the boards in January, end of January, looking for authorization. So I'd say we're a little bit ahead of,
Yeah, I was
If you
talking
look
to Jeff.
halfway down the first page, or the second page, she's got the last several years. Obviously, last year was a boomer, but the year before.
That's the total spend, though.
Right.
Right. I'm just trying to see where we're at as far as benchmarking the point where you're coming to us and asking us for this approval.
Oh, well, she's spent, of the 200, she's saying she's
140.
spent 140 and she's got more accrued.
I don't think you understood the
Yeah.
question that I
Which is,
asked,
it's
though.
usually come in
Okay, what
mid-January,
is
or
it? Usually
comes in
mid-January, or
mid-January.
March, or when is it?
So you answered it right. I got it, Bonnie.
I was talking to Jim Clyde the other day.
Pardon? Nope.
Nope,
Third
upstairs.
Income.
I was talking to Jim Clyde the other day, and he
Much
said,
more friendly.
even for 2 inches of snow, he's got to get all the streets.
Right.
The same level of effort as a foot of snow.
Yep.
It's between, Jimmy and I have figured out, it's between 50 and 60,000 a normal storm. But that means, 2 inches or 6 inches.
Yeah.
If it is beyond that and requires another round, then, it's not quite 50, but it's on a regular traditional storm, it's about 50 at least to get things clear.
And he had mentioned how many thousands of miles the trucks
Yeah.
traveled. And it
that was
just
interesting.
boggled my mind that we have that much,
Yeah.
You know,
It's 62 miles of road, 63?
62 miles of road, and then, with all the vehicles that they have driving and how many times they go
times.
around, it's
Yeah.
thousands of miles. But, the technology, like Kirby was talking about earlier, is amazing. You can figure out, if somebody calls and says, hey, I live on this street and they haven't plowed my road yet, Jimmy can actually go onto the system and see, the truck went by 5 minutes ago, and, they can map that out. He can, and if it hasn't been done, he can also look and say, so-and-so is closest, you go over there and
Redirect
hit
them.
that road. So,
Wow.
I don't
Amazing.
have to worry about that, he doesn't plow me.
yeah.
He doesn't plow me either.
He plows me twice
You're
to make
special.
up for the fact.
I have the state take care of me, so.
You
All
ready for
right,
a
yeah,
motion?
go for it.
Move that the FinCom vote pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 31D, to approve incurring expenses in excess of the available appropriation for snow and ice removal for fiscal year 2016.
Second?
All right, any other discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you very much.
Okay, just as far as a budget update goes, I don't have a whole lot of new information right now, but I wanted to share with you kind of what the status of the deficits are, because there's several surpluses and deficit numbers that are out there, so I just wanted to kind of quantify what they mean right now and where we are in the budget process. As we go forward today, we are still using the town's level staffing budget scenarios. There are two exceptions that are being looked at this point. One has been decided on, but it didn't affect staffing, and another is still a staffing request for highway in the engineering area. Last night, the Board of Selectmen voted to approve an increase in the IT services budget, which is contracted services. With the reconfiguration of how Light and Water is outsourcing their IT support, we needed to make some changes on our side, because what they do, we're all on the same backbone, and what they do affects us. The other part of that is, you might remember in the budget hearing that Nancy's, when you look at the org chart for IT, it's Nancy. And, when you compare that to other communities, there's 4 or 5 people, and it's Nancy. It's all Nancy, everywhere. Nancy covers the public safety buildings that run 24/7. She also covers the library and all the public access that goes with that. Phone systems, network systems, everything. The demand for desktop service support is incredible on her. Also, the demand for high-level functioning, such as researching document management systems in order to comply with the public records request laws that are, changing, website development, to try and function at that level and still, my fax machine's not working, my computer went down. It's very difficult to get a block of hours to basically do that high-level work. She researched 2 different avenues to try and address that. One was the request that she put in the budget process for a 15-hour-a-week assistant help person to try and handle some of that desktop support. The other is that she looked through the vendor that Light and Water is using. Light and Water was kind enough to involve her in the whole process of reviewing different vendors and actually, soliciting the service with them. So she was able to negotiate a service agreement with them that would provide 24-hour, 7-day-a-week remote desktop support for police and fire, along with the management of desktop support during like 10 to 6 for town hall and other buildings that the town is not open 24/7. And a certain number of hours, I think it was 8 hours a month of on-site support to do like maintenance, like go through and check the copy machines and make sure that, that systems are working so that they don't fail and then cause a problem. That cost was $35,000 and doesn't affect fringe or OPEB or, liabilities going forward. The cost for hiring somebody is about $19,000 with fringe of about $6,300, and it's only 15 hours a week of support. So it's not, it's in-house, it's great, but it's 15 hours a week versus 24/7 in the facilities that need it and, 10 to 6 here. So the selectmen voted last night to support the inclusion of that 35,000 rather than increase FTE count. So that is factored into the budget.
It's in these numbers?
It's in these numbers, yes. So I wanted to quantify that as it's a level staffing budget.
Did they talk about any of the other departments?
They-
Like town clerk had a request in, veterans agent had a request in, COA, or Health and Human Services had a
Yeah, they have.
request in. Did they discuss any of those?
They did not discuss any of those. They were, I did present them with the requests in the chart that we had kind of, figured out before. The two that I was invited to present information on was IT support services and highway engineering. So I went through the highway engineering. I need to go back on Monday with a better cost analysis of what maybe potential savings might be if we go forward with a request of this nature. I did specify that we can make it budget neutral and that, we can offset any increase by, maybe reducing the roadway budget. We can increase the budget. We can talk about those things. But that the engineering support component was something that has been rising and will continue to rise with like the MS4 stormwater permit regulations that are forthcoming. I also kind of gave a little bit of history in that the highway did have engineering support up until 2008 at some level. It was full-time until 2003 when Eric Derling retired to part-time status. And then he fully retired in 2008. In 2008, we were under a fiscal crisis, and we were eliminating anybody that left their job, we did not fill it. Highway has a tendency to turn over positions more quickly, and he lost 2 bodies that year. So he lost the engineering person, and he lost a full-time laborer. So he's down 2 people still from that. He really hasn't recovered. So we did look at trying to figure out, can you hire an engineer without increasing staffing, because, if you take another position that might be retiring and don't fill it, but because he's down already, it's to take him down another level would significantly impact his service delivery. So they did want me to come back and identify, maybe through the roadway budget and the engineering component, things that we're paying our outside engineers to do now that might not be needed at the same level, having an in-house engineer, construction oversight services, resident engineering services. Not saying that you'd eliminate it, but maybe you could cut it in half. Maybe there's, just to identify the savings that could be attained through that. So I'm committed to doing that for next Monday, and we'll continue that discussion. So I'm not sure, what the outcome will be, but that's what the plan is.
In the organizational study that the selectmen funded
Yes.
almost a year ago now, as I recall, stated that their recommendation was the engineering head plus 2 laborers for, at least for parks, as I recall.
Yep.
I don't have the data in front of me, but that was the management study
Correct.
that the selectmen funded on that department. So putting one of those 3 heads back doesn't seem to be totally out of the realm of reasonability.
Agreed.
Spend money on the studies and then ignore what they say. It's kind of
Yeah.
Or-
So the other thing that came out of the discussion last night from Selectman Avella was to look at the operating budget and in not raising the full 2.5% levy, raising instead 1.5%. So I've got some just quick and dirty numbers that I just wanted to show you, but I'll present this for the joint meeting, and we'll go through that. And just as another update, we did meet with the school department before school vacation, the Friday before.
Friday.
Yeah, the Friday before February vacation. So most of the school employees were not around last week. Steve Mark has already reached out, and we've reached out to him, and we'll be meeting with him tomorrow morning to kind of go through some of the budget figures. But they did commit to providing a budget document in a format that we can verify prior to the March 7th joint meeting. So, and it wasn't really about we didn't really have the conversation around justifying the request that was in there. It was just validating the data. So we just wanted to be able to say that, yes, two more staff people in this area will impact costs by this much. And we can confirm that. That, special ed costs went up by this because of this, and we can verify it, just to validate it. And then I made it perfectly clear that from that point, it's the Finance Committee and Board of Selectmen's job to make the recommendations on what level would be appropriate for the town. It's not my job to do that, but my job is to validate the data, and I need the data in order to
They
validate
were
it.
concerned that Bonnie's office was telling them, you can't have this and you can't have that. Why are you doing this? All she was saying was, if you're going to do that, show me the data so I can confirm it. That's all.
Right?
Right.
I think they finally did understand that by the time we got through with the meeting.
Okay, good.
So I'll keep you posted as to what data we receive, but first meeting tomorrow, so. And with that said, what I did is I printed,
I just want to talk about the head count again, because the one thing I want to make sure is we talk or don't talk about additional people going forward. Again, these requests, especially the veterans agent and the town clerk, that's no additional head count, it's additional hours.
right,
And I think it's something we really need to look at. We opened the dump on Wednesday night. I think having town hall open one night a week would be more useful. And so,
And the situation with town clerk is elected, doesn't report to the selectmen, doesn't report to anybody.
Right.
So, just want to make sure that it gets a fair hearing.
right.
If we think it's worthwhile, then we should recommend we put it in. If we don't think it's worthwhile, then we shouldn't. But I just want to make sure that it gets its day in court, and that it gets discussed and voted yea or nay, at least by us. And if we recommend it and the selectmen don't, well, okay, so be it. It can be discussed on town meeting floor.
Right.
And.
It might
you
be a
know,
good opportunity, if you guys are comfortable making a recommendation, I can include it in Monday, with their meeting next Monday. They scheduled an additional meeting because there's just too many things to consider. I can include it, as part of the Finance Committee, recommendations to consider.
And we've got a meeting on the 7th with them, right?
Right.
So,
Right,
but I just want to make sure that, the two headcount / dollar impacts that Bonnie's talking about are within the sphere of the selectmen, which sort of brings the point out that make sure Diane gets a fair hearing. The veterans agent, I guess technically is under the selectmen, right? So that small amount, but just make sure that it gets up there. And as long as either we agree or we don't, and we at least opine on it, I think is important.
I'd still like to hear where the selectmen are leaning towards it before we render a decision. That's my opinion of it.
Well, we're meeting with them on the
Just make a
7th.
recommendation, that's all.
Yeah,
recommend they discuss it at this point, at least.
right.
Because of today,
Right,
I mean,
That's
it's not even-
all,
not
that's all
even-
I'm saying is,
not even being
is,
discussed.
if they don't even discuss it, then there's there's nothing for us to talk about. But in the case of the clerk, whether they think having the clerk's office open on a night during the week is fine. But if we think it's different than they do, then we should feel that if we feel strongly enough about it, we should vote for it and discuss it on town meeting floor and let town meeting vote. If we agree with the selectmen one way or another, great, absolutely great. And, I mean, we do work historically to get to the point where we sort of hash everything out before we get to town meeting, so that it doesn't look like there's a big Donnybrook going on. But as long as they're discussed, the issues are discussed, and they're voted upon by both boards, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference to me which way they come out, but I want to make sure they're discussed.
Great.
Good?
okay. So I provided 3 budget worksheets here, and I apologize, I don't know if the copy machine cut off a couple of the scratchings that I made, but the first one, so it's a surplus of $800,000. Now, at the budget discussion that we had,
Wait a minute, I want to make sure I got the right, oh, because you're looking down some at the bottom, okay, I got it, I was looking up at the numbers at the top, okay.
at the budget meeting with the school department, I originally had 555,000 plugged in here, because I knew that that was the amount that was at least needed to cover wages that were due contractually. And at the school committee chair said, I'd rather have you have zero than a number that, and that was said a few times, so with that caveat, the number in here for the school is level funded, and I know that that's not a realistic number, but that's where this 800,000 comes from. It means level staffing for the town, no FTE increase, no hours increase.
For the entire town?
Yes,
Let's go to school.
right. So the next one,
So this.
So that one will be thrown out.
Exactly.
I know that.
But
It's,
this does or does not include the 37,000 that they voted for last night, that selectmen voted for last night?
it does include that.
Does include
Yes,
that,
it does
okay.
include that.
Okay.
The next one is with the budget scenario that I had originally started with, which was a percentage-based increase for the school at 4%, which totals $690,000. At that level, the budget surplus is $110,000. Now, the reason that I'd come up with the 4% too was because that equates to the town's operating budget increase also. So it was fair. I didn't come to it any other scientific method other than it seems like a fair starting place. I know that the contractually obligated increases are $555,000, so I know that that covers that. Right, it covers that. The next one is with the town level staffing again, and with the school's full request at $1,245,000 increase. So then the deficit appears at $444,000. So in order to sustain a school appropriation at that level, there are going to be reductions needed in other areas. The last page I provided is just a little spreadsheet that I worked out this afternoon very quickly. And it was just in reference to the comment last night about using, 1.5% instead of 2.5%. So at the same budget levels, you can see the levy increase at 2.5% is $761,000. That's our normal 2.5% increase. So if I reduce that to 1.5%, it's $456,000 or a $304,000 reduction. So instead of at our level staffing budget with a zero increase to the school, instead of an $800,000 surplus, I have $496,000 surplus. The town level staffing with $690,000 for the school, instead of $110,000 surplus, I have a deficit of $193,000. And the last one, the same thing, with the school request at the $1,245,000, instead of a $444,000 deficit, I have $748,000 in deficit. So the reductions, if we don't raise to the full 2.5, will need to be in that level to support.
So what was, it was just discussed, or was any?
It was just, and it was
no
just
voting
requested,
or-
no, it was just requested last night, so I didn't even have any data to show them.
Oh, I see, they just requested numbers last night.
Yeah, so they will have that presented to them at their next,
Well, Paul mentioned at our policies committee
Yep.
meeting that he was going to propose it. So, there it
Look
is.
like it's-
It's only a month now.
Well, the other thing is, and I understand where he's going with it and so on, we do have policies and procedures, and according to that, we cannot do this until we're up to speed on our multiple things, which we never thought we'd get to, which we are right now, but the OPEB, we are not. And so, if we did this, it would also be going against the policies that we have in place.
Well, depending on what the school is funded at,
Right.
we may not be meeting, that was at my assumption of 690,000.
Right.
So if it's,
We may not even be there anyway,
So,
right?
you know.
That's another discussion. So, there was also, not that we, I guess, get into it now, but I know Steve had some other ideas of doing this, because the other issue with not levying to the full amount, it's not like it goes away and you never get it back. It's still sitting out there in the bucket, and somebody 2 years from now could just bump the taxes up that much more, which would be a
Right.
bigger hit.
so if
So
you
that's the other
didn't spend the
there's
300,000.
other ways to do it, right?
Then you would have potentially available next year I don't know, say it's 800,000 for the 2.5% increase.
Right.
Plus the 300,000 that you didn't raise
Right.
previously. So, you could have, a 4% increase on your taxes without,
You're just kicking the can down the road.
That's right.
Kind
Yeah.
of, yep. So the other, but the other thought was that if we were in one of the scenarios where there was some surplus,
Yep.
Steve also thought we could have the same effect without messing around with the levy because
Right.
of the other issues there, but paying off some of the other debt that we had.
what we would propose doing, if there's a surplus available, or there's an amount that that the boards want to allocate towards reducing the excluded debt, it would have the same impact to the taxpayer. So right now, we have the 2.5 plus growth, we're going to raise that. And then you have the amount that you can raise because of excluded debt for the police station, for the school projects that are out there. That gets added on top of all of this stuff anyway. You could say, we're going to take 200,000 inside the levy, pay that excluded debt, we keep the levy stable, but the taxpayers recognize the savings because we didn't go and hit them for the additional amount that was excluded. We've done that with other projects, not with bonded debt, but we've done it with project-specific items that were authorized for excluded debt, like the track and, some of the Russell Street School. So
Budget, right?
it has the same effect on the taxpayer. It does save them in their pocket. It keeps the levy stable so that it wouldn't increase by 5%, in the following year instead of, 2.5.
And we're following our procedures, which is important for our bond rating and all those other things, too. I mean, I know some people think that they're just guidelines, and they're certainly not, you absolutely have to, or, something, but you have them there in place, so, for a reason, and,
You don't overturn a policy that you voted on unless you've got a real problem,
right,
Right.
that there's no other solution. So,
yeah. So, okay, anyway, thank
So-
you for,
That's,
we'll see, but on the other hand, I do think it's good to have the discussion. If you have a year where there's a little bit extra, you should actually have the hard discussions and look at everything and say, just because it's there, you don't spend it. So I absolutely appreciate the intent there.
Yep.
Um,
good discussion.
We've done that with capital, right?
Right,
Same
we've
thing.
done
Just,
it in the
you don't-
past, and,
Right,
I think it's a great way to,
right.
give people a little bit of a break.
Challenging ourselves on how we're doing things and so on. Very important. All right, anything else on the budget you want to talk? I guess this is where we are. So what's the timeline on, so the schools is supposed to come back, that's supposed to get,
They are committed to being able to provide us with the data that we can share, that we can validate and share with you prior to the 7th meeting. And we reminded them that that's the Friday before, because that's when we get packets together, and that's when data goes out to the board. So they committed to that. So and Steve has been, communicative this week, and
okay, all right.
we're meeting tomorrow. I do have the draft warrant as they stand right now, and I'm happy to walk through that if
Okay,
you would like.
yep.
So that looks like this. The items that, if you look at the special town meeting at 7:30, at that point in the page, you see the items that are dark, like 1 bill of prior years and 2 fiscal 2016 line item transfers, those were already voted to be inserted. Last night, they also voted to insert Article 3, which I circled. And so Article 4 has not been inserted yet. 5 has been inserted. And then I circled the ones that they voted to insert last night for the annual town meeting.
So,
And then I can just walk through if it,
all right, I guess walk through it, because I don't understand capital plan amendments. I don't understand.
yep, I'll walk right through
Okay.
that. So the first one is bills of prior year. I don't have any yet, but we always insert this article,
Middle of this time.
just in case we get some. Occasionally we do.
Sorry, I was distracted by
The flying chair.
You thought he was going to throw the chair at you.
Identity.
he started yelling, I'm not going to take it anymore.
Bobby, I ain't throwing chairs.
You've heard the
We
term.
appropriate a few bucks.
You want Fincom on this.
All right, Bonnie, sorry, so we're.
That's okay.
we're,
So, bills of
going
prior
through the
year, they did vote to insert the
warrant
articles.
articles.
We don't have any bills of prior year at this point, but we might, prior to town meeting, so It's in there, just as a holding place. Article 2 are operating budget line item transfers. We typically have a few of these. They're usually cleanup items for anything that might run over or under that we want to just transfer for the current fiscal year. I don't have any ideas on what those might be at this point, but we'll wrap them up prior to the motions. Capital improvement plan adjustments. There's an adjustment needed between the facility needs assessment study recommendations article from last year, which was approved, let's see, May of 2015. We need to move $12,952 from the police headquarters line item for that to the town office and library line item. The police headquarters line item covered crack sealing done down there.
Right.
And the actual cost came in much less than the budgeted cost. That is allowing the committee to consider doing some of the crack sealing that's needed up here, which was not put into the town meeting, the town office line item for this particular capital request. So that would just be a transfer. There's no fiscal impact. There's no additional appropriation. It's just within line items.
That would increase what we're going to do in the facilities management for this year by the $12,952. We can do more crack sealing.
Well, it's not, it won't increase it, it'll just transfer it.
Transfer it because it's
but we-
already approved.
Yeah, what?
Increase in scope.
But we are asking for 12,000 and some odd dollars additional for the parking lot out here. So that amount plus this amount will
Is
equal
25.
$25,000.
Right,
Okay.
Yeah.
right. So it's just reallocating the, balances that might remain in other projects. The second one is a zoning bylaw consulting services that's requested by the Board of Selectmen to engage professional services to assist in the preparation of proposed amendments to the zoning bylaw, including inclusionary zoning and over 55 housing developments, and review of the sign bylaw. This is kind of being done in tandem with the master planning process. The board feels that this is an important part that needs to be considered in coordinating the master plan process. And they are estimating, they've got some quotes, I believe, in the amount of $25,000. But they'll finalize that and be prepared to kind of go through that.
So where does
at a
that
joint meeting.
25,000 come from?
It's from Raise and Appropriate. It's part of what's available for capital. When I put together the capital plan, I put together all of it except for about 50,000 every year.
Okay, so
Because
you always have a
because there's
bucket
always
there.
something that may not be capital, but may be one time, and I need to budget an amount that's, maybe there are a lot of bills a prior year, some big bill comes through. So there is an amount that's available that was not included into the capital, and this would be okay for that.
Excuse me, just for clarification, on the 12,000 or the 13,000 that we're going to shift, the reason that that's in the special
Is so we can
is
use it
so
immediately.
you can get started.
Yeah.
Because the other 12,000 won't be available until July 1st.
Correct.
So you're going to sort of do it over time.
Well, it'll allow us to get the contract documents out.
Oh, okay, because you've got this funding, and then by
Yeah.
the time you let it, you can do that. Okay.
You can
That's
start
fine.
the next day after the special.
Right,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Right. There's going to be one other, I'm sorry, let's go to 4. 4 was not inserted yet. We're finalizing the figures for the CPC additional appropriations. We're looking at the cell tower account balances and any of the mitigation payments that have come in from the Reed Meadow and 15 Great Road to figure out what amounts can go into what buckets. So that will be presented to you by the 7th. CPC will be in, I believe, also on the 7th for that meeting, so that'll be a good discussion
So this
there.
is to put money into CPC?
Into it, yes.
This is some of the
So
extra
that
money to get
we
the
can
extra matching?
Increase the state
Okay.
match, yes. And that's why it's in the special.
Yep.
Let's see, the Article 5 is the Mill Pond Restoration Project that you were briefed on previously. It's $67,500 coming out of Clean Lake, so there's no impact to the levy or the tax rate. And again, we've discussed this with Corey from the Littleton Water Department at length.
I wish the newspaper did a better job of explaining that. 'Cause they make it always sound like the voters are going to vote on whether they want to spend the money to do this, and
Yeah.
they are, but it's not quite the same as, anyway.
Yep.
Oh, there's your PSA.
There we go,
Right.
huh?
There you go.
Clean Lakes Committee needs to do that, but yeah, you're right, yeah.
There'll be one other article inserted by the next meeting, and that would be for a request to appropriate insurance reimbursement money for the damage that was done at the high school with the pipe that burst. I don't know if you were aware of it, but over the vacation, during that cold snap, there was a pipe that burst at the high school, flooded out one of the classrooms, and then went down and ruined some electronic equipment. So we've got a claim going with Maya. It will be in excess of $20,000. And under the statute, anything that's insurance reimbursement over $20,000 has to be authorized by town meeting to be expended. That's what, it's one of those things that it's actually up for review this coming fiscal year to see if, the state will rescind that requirement for the towns to do that. You're just replacing your equipment. You shouldn't have to wait for town meeting to,
Town meeting to do that.
but it is the statute now, so we're going to insert an article.
So what happens in the meantime? You can't replace, you can't do this stuff?
They're right now meeting with Maya and going through, and they've done the cleanup and everything like that. They're formulating the claim. They'll get the claim paperwork in, but they have to start fixing the items now. But it would create a shortfall, in theory for them if they didn't get
That's what
reimbursed.
they've got reserves for the short term, and then they can backfill when
With
the
this.
claim comes in.
So we can do that? I thought you were just saying that we couldn't do anything with that until town meeting voted for stuff.
I can't expend it until town meeting
She
votes it.
can't, the
So they'll use their reserves.
check that comes in,
They
we can't do.
being who?
The school.
The school, okay.
Yeah.
So they'll use their reserves
Okay.
to do what they need to do, and
Right.
once this gets authorized,
Yeah.
then we'll reclassify the expense.
So what if it wasn't the schools? What if it was somebody else, and how does that happen?
Same way. If it's over $20,000, it's
Yeah.
got to go to town meeting. Remember Jimmy Clegg had one for,
I'm
Yeah.
trying to understand the timing in terms of getting this. So if it has to go to town meeting,
Has
but,
to.
so you do another one of these reserve in front of us to get the
right.
money?
The last time this happened with Jimmy, you authorized a reserve fund transfer to him, and then we just
Something,
let the
right?
receipt go to the general fund and closed it that way.
But if something really big came, then we've got a
Well, we have the
cold-
reserves,
cold-
that's why we have it, right? If
Right.
it's
but
really big,
I don't know how big this one's going to be. I mean,
right?
Right.
it's there's a lot of.
Well, that's why you have reserves, now I have insurance, so I guess it's just a timing thing. and
Right.
Just
The
So they-
question is, what happens if town meeting doesn't approve it?
Yeah, I can't imagine.
It's kind of a risky,
Yeah. If town meeting
way of
didn't approve it, the
getting
receipt would go to the
reimbursed for
general
insurance.
fund and be closed,
Yeah, so it'd end up as free cash
Right.
a year later, right?
Right. Right.
that's
What kind of deductible does the town have on these policies?
1,000 for,
Only 1,000?
yeah, for that,
Wow.
yeah. Depends on the type of expenditure, but something like this, it's 1,000. Certain liabilities, it's 10,000. It's,
Yeah, I'm surprised it's that low.
Save some money. Okay.
okay, so we'll move to the annual.
Can we, I have a question before we go on to that. At the, what do we call this? The facility needs assessment meeting that we had on the 17th. We had a spreadsheet that I sent you on the 18th. We had taken out $40,000 for engineering and professional services,
Right,
because that was to be a separate budget item
correct.
to be part of the special town meeting?
No, what we've done is put it into our operating budget.
Okay,
If you need to do that for the fiscal 16 to get things started, we'll do it as part of the year-end transfers from public buildings to,
well, we were hoping to start some of the engineering drawings for Shaker Lane and Russell Street
okay.
as soon as possible.
Then I can do that in the special town meeting budget transfer article?
That's what we were hoping.
Okay, so
And that's
if you
what
can
Jim
just-
Carr said that was going to happen. He was going to talk to you about it?
Yep, we can do that, I just don't have an amount for this fiscal year. I have next year's incorporated, the 40,000.
Okay. Well, that was the money we were going to use for Russell and Shaker Lane.
Okay, so you'll have, 40 is in there for fiscal 2017?
Right. But we can't
What-
spend that until June 1st.
Right, so what amount do you need for 16 to carry you through to May? I mean, to the end of June?
You know, I'd plug in about 12,500,
Okay.
something like that.
Okay,
You plug that into the specials and we'll have the money.
right,
Get
it'll be
started.
right away. It'll
Right.
be- So it'll be under Article 2 of the special town meeting.
Okay.
I will do a transfer to cover that.
Okay, great.
Pays to serve on multiple boards.
It does, yeah.
Okay, I will do that. Let's see, okay, Article 1 is the town officers and committees. I think that's when they do the weighers and the, I don't know.
Fence viewers.
Yes, there you go.
What is it?
Well, the fence viewers and
Layers of.
Seals and
rain.
measures.
Yes.
Oh, right, right.
we had to listen to Charlie tell us how they used to ride around, the girlfriend and the boyfriend used to ride around in the horse-drawn carts. Oh, yeah. Those were the good old days.
That was when Mr. Kimball was still around, right?
Yes, sir.
Let's see, Article 2 is just the annual report. Article 3 is our revolving funds article. The only changes here are, let's see, we included Article, item 15, the last one down there, is the school department transportation revolving account. They have a school busing account. It's always been established. It's where they take the busing fees in and then pay, expenditures out of it. But it's not one that is authorized under the school, like Mass General Law 71. They have their own little set of accounts that they can have without having to get town meeting authorization. So it's always been in existence. This is not a new account. However, it was never authorized properly. So it needs to be authorized in this manner in order to continue. So we're just correcting that.
So 100,000 is enough for that?
It's about what runs through it
Is that
annually. Steve was looking at it, it might need to change, but I looked at
I'm
what
just
ran through it
surprised
last
it's
year.
that low. That's what I thought, I mean, was my concern.
Yeah, I looked at what was run through it last year, but
Okay.
Steve and I are meeting tomorrow, and he'll kind of look through and see if that's the
Okay.
right amount, but it might, it might need to be changed. And then we eliminated, the dog licensing fees. That was a small one that we used to pay animal control bills out of, and I said, this is kind of crazy to have a small account for that. So I'm going to close that to the general fund, and we're just going to use that animal control expense through the general fund. So it's neutral on the budget, but it's just going to make it so that you'll see the expense, because right now, you don't see what the animal control expense is for the town, really, anywhere.
It's just extra paperwork for not much
Right,
money or
to
real
keep-
control anyway, it's not
You
an
don't need
issue,
to keep
right.
the
So
account
we don't
separate.
have to get a tag for the dog anymore?
You have to get your tag for the dog. Yes, you do.
But it doesn't cost me $10?
No, it's still gonna, probably might cost you more.
So this is,
Going up.
Keep asking, Alan.
Here's
This is just paper.
Alan,
Dog ownership's
quit while
going
you're
up.
ahead.
This is our effort to provide more budget transparency, so that you can actually, if I run the report, you're gonna see animal control, in there.
so it's just paperwork.
It's paperwork. All right. And I think that was it for changes on that.
I know.
Yes, all the others are the same. So Article 4 is the budget article that will be crafted as we continue our journey towards March 7th. The water article has not been drafted yet. I know that Scott Edwards is working on it now.
Yep.
We've gone back and forth. He just had a couple of clarifying questions, so I expect that any day at this point. So we will, in no doubt, have it for the 7th anyway. Article 6 is the Park and Rec Enterprise article that was presented at your budget hearing. It has not changed. It's the same level, and I did confirm it with Alicia actually today. So that was inserted. Article 7 has not been inserted yet, only because we were waiting for the facilities and infrastructure item for the Shaker Lane Univents. I did speak to Selectman Carr last night and just said, we're going to hold with the 68,000, and, if we are able to recognize savings in others, we'll come back. We won't spend it, and we'll reallocate it. but-
Yeah, well, Steve Mark sent that email out.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I did confirm that, so I've got that in my spreadsheet now, so I'll update Keith with that.
I see you still have the engineering reports under the facilities.
Yeah, he hadn't received the update with all of
Okay.
the other information. So this will be revised, and in any case, it's not inserted yet, so.
Okay.
I think that was that there. So,
Oh, and then also, you've got a question mark on item number 5, Shaker Lane School paving, curb and sidewalk.
yep,
That is part of item number 1.
right,
Okay,
I remember that.
okay.
Yeah, he didn't get the latest and greatest by the time he drafted this for the
Okay.
packet. Let's see. I don't think anything else nothing in here has changed since yes, there is one change. If you go to page 5, top of the page, item D, this is the SCBA equipment that was requested by the fire department, and it was in the amount of $300,000. We've applied for a FEMA grant. We do not know if we will receive the grant or not, but we will not know until August whether we receive it. The local match is $15,000, so we need to appropriate that at this point, but to appropriate the full amount would kind of disqualify us for the grant, because
already been
we wouldn't have any need for it
interesting.
at that level. So we don't want to appropriate that. However, I have reserved the funding and set it aside. We can,
If we need it,
if we
we'll come
need it,
back in the fall.
absolutely. So I did reserve it in the budget document, so it doesn't flow to, operating or anything, but I wanted to clarify that difference. The other thing is item E may be moved to the special town meeting in order to start commencing with an RFQ for design services for this particular project, rather than wait until July to start.
Good idea.
Let's see, Article 8 has not been completed yet, but is in the works. I've seen a couple of small items. I have not seen any large requests for funding. I've seen, $10,000 for the Historic Resources Survey, $17,000 for the fencing around 300 King from Park and Rec, and there's a Regional Housing Services at $5,000. I haven't really seen anything else other than the existing debt service, but I'll keep you aware of, if anything rises to that level. Article 9 is the Personnel Board bylaw adjustments, and it incorporates the 2% salary schedule adjustment that was recommended both by the Personnel Board
Right.
and Board of Selectmen, and it,
It mirrors what the unions were getting, so.
correct, all of the collective bargaining units.
The other part of that is the Schedule Cs, community education, most of it has to do with the Park and Rec, is the state raised the minimum wage to $10 an hour, and we had some Park and Rec employees that were making less than that. So we had to redo their salary schedules, and that reflects it here.
So that was adopted and inserted last night for the warrant
Yeah.
without an issue. Article 10 is the stabilization fund. This is what keeps us at our 5% minimum. So there is no amount referenced in here because it's 5% of the operating budget. If the
Whatever
school
that
budget
is.
is $1 million more than what, I have to adjust it
That's a plug
when we
number,
get
yep.
when we get a figure. So I will provide that once we nail down the school appropriation. Capital stabilization, we have to put a minimum of $25,000 in at this point with what we have for capital spending. We can always add more, this can be modified, up until we finalize the warrant, but,
Excuse me, can I just step back to capital for a minute?
yep.
Two big items that are missing that were on lists was, one, there was a $400,000 for stands down at Alumni Field, and then Park and Rec had plugged a big question mark for Alumni Field. So we're knowingly not doing either one of those. It's not going to come up as a surprise at the end.
I have not seen anything
It's just make sure it's not there, that's
come
all.
through. I haven't seen the feasibility study as of yet. I'm understanding that it's coming, but until it appears, I have nothing to act on to,
Okay.
I'm actually going to a meeting after this
okay.
for the fields,
Okay.
so I'll be able to
You'll be back.
report. Whatever I was asked to attend.
So, and do you know if that includes, oh, I don't know, this anyway, talking about the bleachers and so on as well, or is this just field?
Just the turf,
Okay.
from what I understand.
Okay, because I think, as I recall, I'm digging into my foggy memory here, but I think the schools plugged in 400 grand
Yeah.
line item for the
Yeah.
stands.
For the stands.
And then Park and Rec
Had a
put a
question.
line item in with a question mark, so we didn't know what was going on. And then you mentioned, Tom, I don't know, maybe the last meeting or the meeting before, that maybe there was an option, at least as a stopgap, to do some serious repairs using funds from the youth
Yeah,
leagues or
yeah.
manpower or whatever from the youth leagues to do that, so that I just didn't know where we were.
Yeah, I had a meeting with Park and Rec last Tuesday.
Okay.
And we discussed it. There's a lot more work to be done in terms
Okay.
of coming up with proposals and costs. What I learned is that whatever work is done on public land has got to be done at prevailing wage, which, if we have volunteers, that would, that would preclude us from doing volunteer
There are
work.
certain things.
Does
you
your
can
league
do.
want to buy a field for $10?
Well, yeah,
I think we
it's-
can probably cut you a deal.
Yeah, well, and then last night, I was at the Board of Selectmen meeting, and they talked about the Cooper Field, the Cooper.
Potential there is,
And they're talking two athletic fields,
Right.
which would be huge. That would be, that solves a lot of problems.
yeah, no, I was impressed with what they came back with, to be honest with you, when I saw it, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure that it wasn't left off and would come up with something.
Yeah, I mean, if it comes forward for this town meeting, I'll need to do some
Okay.
work, figure out,
Okay.
It was interesting, I don't know if you saw that news item, that apparently the federal government now is really pushing on these things and demanding that the EPA and some of these come up with some recommendation, but then that's not till the fall, right? I think it is, or something like that, but.
Yeah.
Well, the government's doing a study.
Yeah.
So what I've heard through, the folks that are pushing the agenda on the turf, is there is Lawrence Academy put in a turf field using sand and cork as, instead of the,
Right, a
From rubber.
non-carcinogen,
right.
yeah.
And apparently that has been very successful. Now, I don't know nothing about it.
Right,
I don't know if
sure.
it doubles the cost or what.
Right,
But that's what I think they're going down that path, given all the resistance that came up
Yeah.
when they went to town meeting last time.
When it rains, all the cork floats away. I don't know. I don't know.
Which goes to the cost element,
Right, right. To drink more wine, get more corks, right.
Recork it.
Put a cork in it, okay, great.
When I was in Madeira, they have the cork wood that is as hard as any wood you'd want to find.
Well, I don't think that's what they're putting in the turf
Yeah.
field.
Never.
It's probably not.
Okay,
much.
right, sorry to just
Yeah.
derail us. Okay.
A little rebounding, right?
So Article 8, again, we'll come back with the budget on that. Article 9 was fine, Article 10, and Article 11.
12.
Can I just ask one question, back to the thing about the prevailing wages in the public land? So how would you, because you mentioned some of these other towns are already doing this, that somehow they have people doing it.
Yeah, and that came up, and so Alicia said, can you get me in touch with the people in Groton who, did the, because Groton did, I spoke to the guy in Groton who was involved in it, in doing that field. And they, did all kinds of work to it. They dug a well,
Yep.
and they put in a sprinkler system. I mean, they did all kinds of work to it. Privately, the town had nothing to do with it,
Right.
but the town owns the land. And so,
That doesn't sound right.
yeah, but now the town is now taking over, the town kind of stepped in and said, okay, hey, we want to start, let us start, mowing it.
Maintaining it.
Maintaining
Yeah,
it.
yeah, right.
And we want to use the well for the other surrounding fields. And they said, sure, and so, the town saw how successful that was, and,
Yeah, I mean, you can
So-
do
so Alicia's
community
gonna check
build.
into it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, community build projects, you can do without having to incur prevailing wage costs, but there are a lot of restrictions on it. You can't, a guy can't come in and bring his employees in to do earth removal services, and, because those employees need to be paid prevailing wage. If you're doing a community build or a community project, that's outside of it. You can volunteer, and you just have to know the guidelines around it.
well, and what they said was really, it was around the maintenance as opposed to the one-time capital event where you might be putting down new grass and all that, but then on an ongoing basis, whoever does the maintenance has to be paid prevailing wage. I think that's what they were talking about.
How they figured that out.
Okay.
Well, what would be different than the selectmen accepting in-kind service from the gentleman who did the field study? I mean, that's I guess a volunteer, a professional volunteering his or her
Those are
time
professional
to
services.
do.
Right, the
And there's no
prevailing-
prevailing rate for professional services.
Yeah.
Oh,
There is
okay.
for mowing a lawn or driving a dump truck.
Yeah, and that was a
or-
one-time.
Okay,
One-time event versus ongoing maintenance, which
okay.
is what they were concerned with.
Yep.
Okay. Learn something new every day.
Hopefully.
Article 12 is to establish the, and fund the debt exclusion stabilization fund, so we can come forth with a recommendation on a funding level for that. But this was recommended in the financial policies amendments that we adopted. And it would be, able to be used for anything that would qualify for debt exclusion. So you want to pay down debt service, you want to pay down a project like the fire station that might be coming up soon, you could put the money in here and then use it towards that project to reduce the debt. So it's a good thing.
And the money primarily, as we have it set up, it comes from
And
undesignated
Yep.
funds.
Yes. Yep. Yep, absolutely. This, Article 13 is the M.H. Kimball Trust Fund. That is an annual article that there's always an amount of money, somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000, that the school department can use under the guidance of the M.H. Kimball Trust Funds. They were going to use it for the same purposes that they did last year, which was primarily books and materials, but the trustees actually refused the request and requested that the school department come forth with another use, something that was, they want to provide something that's outside of the normal budget process.
Enrichment.
That's, yes. So they are going to come forward with another proposed use for that, and we'll update you as that comes. The senior citizens.
Maybe they could pay for the Kiva expansion. And that's what they use the Kiva for, right? Programs, special programs and whatnot?
Is that their, I don't know what the Kiva,
Okay,
yeah.
just a thought, okay.
Article 14 is the senior and veterans TAC work-off abatement programs. We do $55,000 and $7,000 for each one of those. It's a very well-attended program here, I can say. We use a lot of the senior workers, even in my own office. So it's a great program to have. Mass DOT Chapter 90 funds, once we get the amount from Mass DOT, we'll drop that in there. Last year it was $380,000 some odd dollars. It generally floats in that amount unless there's some additional bill that's filed. It funds it at a higher level. And Article 6 is at request of the water commissioners for cell tower leases. This would allow, currently, anytime that there's a vacancy on one of the towers or one of the sites, they're like 5-year terms. You have to go to town meeting, get a vote, put it out. It takes like 18 months to get the site refilled. This would allow the water department to do an RFP to somebody to manage that process for up to 30 years. So it would protect the revenue stream, because we need to protect the revenue stream on these, because they offset a lot of our debt service, and will for the Mill Pond project, too. So we're concerned that if there's a vacancy that comes up, and we can't turn it around fast enough, because we got to wait for a town meeting and then put it out, and we're not gonna have the revenue stream that we need. And there are vacancies on some of these sites that we could be getting revenue on right now that we're not. So we did meet with Scott and some of the water department employees, and we think that this is a really good thing to do to preserve the revenue going forward. And what we've done is identified each tower, the purpose. This does not change any of the purposes that were originally identified in the original votes. We've referenced all the town meeting votes for each one so that people can, see the original vote. But, most of them are conservation, with the exception of the Cedar Hill and the Great Road Well Number 2 site. Those are water department sources of revenue. Newtown Hill, Spectacle Pond, and Oak Hill are either for conservation or Clean Lakes funding, which are all.
What would be interesting is one more column that would just show how much debt service each one of those towers is funding. So it, just to highlight, if we lose it, if we lose the revenue from tower on Newtown Hill,
Yep.
what is the town on the hook for? So we really should be protecting that revenue almost any way we can, because without that, it falls right to the taxpayer.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Or the ratepayer, yeah,
Yeah, well,
the water ones.
Right.
well, on the two water departments would be the ratepayer,
Yep.
but ultimately, if they go belly up, it's the town.
Right,
So,
absolutely. Yeah.
But certainly the three conservation ones would come directly to the town if
Yep.
some new technology came on and no cell tower revenues were coming in, or
I'll recommend-
somebody put a big tower up that took our repeaters away, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
So that's what that one is for. Article 17 identifies two parcels that we've had interest expressed on for the tax title abutter lot sales program. So these are small parcels under 5,000 square feet that have been acquired through non-payment of taxes and have been on our books and our rolls, not collecting taxes for years. And as people express interest, we put them into this program if they're of this size or smaller. There are deed restrictions on them. They can't have buildings, or they can't combine them with another lot to make a buildable lot. They can only be used for, somebody has a septic system that they need, expansion on, or a deck, or a garage, or something that's needed for a buffer. They're appropriate for that, but it's not intended to create a new buildable lot. So both of these are on Narcissus Road. And typically, when you look in the neighborhoods where these are, they're neighborhoods with small lots, so people need them for septics a lot of the time. And the minimum on these is $1 per square foot. They can't get them for nothing. They have to bid at least $1 per square foot. You have to be in a butter in order to participate in the program. So somebody across town couldn't buy it.
And once they do, then it's taxable land, which it isn't now.
Right,
That's
the
other
minute
thing,
they
too.
buy it, we put it back on the tax rolls, and, yeah.
It's not a lot of tax revenue.
No.
No, but it's, it's more, a public health maybe issue if there are failing septics and, they don't have enough room.
Plus somebody's taking care of it as opposed to
Right,
if it's not. I mean,
exactly.
Right. Yep, okay.
Not our responsibility. Nagard Hill Road easements. This one, Jim Clyde is going to bring more information on. This just came up in the last week. So I apologize, I don't know very much about Article 18. And
It's going to be the Paul Glavy article.
It's Nagog Hill. Nagog. Article 19, swimming pool. This is something that is, I guess, addressed in other areas of Mass General Law and Code. So Roland was very much, yeah, we need to get this, off the books. It's addressed elsewhere, we don't need this referenced anywhere. So it's to basically.
So we're taking something away, we're not adding
Right.
new laws, we're taking
Right.
something away here because it's dealt with elsewhere, okay.
Yep. Article 20, this is the stormwater article that's being worked on now. So this is going to be the big, long, I think, how many pages? I don't know if it's 10 pages or. So we'll have more information. Actually, I think I sent you a note that the selectmen might have this on their agenda on Monday. So if you're interested, do stop by.
So is it the intent that the water department's going to manage this?
I don't think that the water department wants any part of managing this.
Okay.
I think they look at it as they'll help, and they've been very, very helpful to this point, but they view it as a public works.
That's another reason for the desire for the engineer with the highway department as well, right? It's one more reason.
Yeah, because when Greg and I met with Scott
Yeah.
earlier this year, he mentioned that he might end up with it.
Yeah,
So that's not,
no, I think,
Majority.
they've made it very clear that, they've been very helpful. They actually identified the funding, the major funding source for this type of program, and Corey massaged that through the process of the Clean Lakes Committee. And Corey has been, indisposable in helping us with it, but they want it to be, it's a town. And to do otherwise, we'd have to pay for it anyway. If they were providing the service, it's not necessarily a ratepayer expense. So it's pay me now, pay me later.
Oh, so they're not going to try to pass it on to the ratepayers?
Of the water ratepayers? No.
so good.
Oh,
So it's going to be by,
well, it's not a water department issue, it's a
Right.
town issue.
It's a public
That's-
works
that's-
issue, it's not a water issue.
Public Works issue. Makes sense.
Board of Health.
Right.
and Jimmy's got all that GPS information on all the storm drains and everything else.
Well, with the street scan, that was just a happy byproduct of that, because they were showing the thing, and I remember her very quickly saying, oh yeah, and those are your outlets. And I happened to come from a stormwater meeting, and I was like, stormwater outlets? And I remember Jimmy said, we don't even have them all mapped. I'm like, oh my God, they're mapped. So that was a great, help, just to be able to see. I'm sure there's more work that needs to be done, but it was just, it's helpful.
Yeah, speaking of the street scan, have the selectmen scheduled any discussions on that?
They haven't, they're going to wait until after town meeting, because right now we have enough work to get through, we've got to get through New Estate and NAGOG, and then I'll do the funding plan and bring it forward for discussion. So they just want to get through the town meeting part now, and then they'll schedule a public hearing on it and go from there.
Is that Nagog Hill Road?
NAGOG is the next one, and it's in design right now. The next three roads named are some big numbers, so it's going to take some looking at the financing.
So.
Who's after
that's-
Nagog?
I can't remember in the plan now. They're both $2 million roads.
So it's not going to be, there's not going to be any extra money for roads then in the budget? That what you're saying, none of this is going to happen until after town meeting?
We have planned for fiscal 2017,
Right.
new NAGOG. NAGOG was always a 2017 road. So we have 2017 covered.
Okay.
It's 18 and beyond that we're
I
planning for
understand.
now.
So that'll be
so-
part of when we talk about the fire
Right.
station and library and roads, it'll be
Right.
part of that whole
Yes.
discussion. Okay.
Yes. Article 22 is a home rule petition to add an additional package store all alcohol license. We had a request to see if we would consider adding one. Since then, we've had another business owner say, I would like to have one too, so there might be some competition.
So say that again, what are we talking about?
We're limited to the number of package stores that we can have based on a lot of demographic information.
Okay.
We can, through this home rule petition, increase it by one. So it's a package store, not a pouring license, not a, restaurant, but only by one. So we may have two people looking to get this one license. We've had a request to say, hey, can you put in for it? And now we've got, two people may be interested in doing it.
That much booze is sold in town that we need another liquor store.
Well, we're getting a
Apparently.
lot of.
Well, look at the dumpster over at the transfer station.
Good
Yeah.
point. Good point, yeah.
So we'll see how that goes. Article 23 is just the annual borrowing authorization, short-term borrowing that might be needed for less than a year. We haven't had to actually do any of this since we went quarterly, but it's always a good one to have on the books in case needs arise. 24 is also the standard compensating balance agreement that allows Steve to enter into with the banks. And Article 25 is personal exemption amounts. This is something that has to get voted every year in order to keep it. If we did not vote this, people would receive a reduced benefit. So we give them whatever the statute says, the exemption is plus 50% on, elderly, disabled veterans, blind. So it's important, keep in the warrant every year. And that's that. That's where we stand so far.
Greg, to your question on the roads, the top 10 that came out of the study, the presentation, the number one road recommendation was Foster Street for $500,000. New Estate for 2.3, which is under construction now.
Construction.
Yeah,
Nagog Hill,
it's under.
which is 1.6, which is the next one. It's actually in design. Harwood for 1.9, Tehadawon for 2.4, and
Those are the two
then
that kill 'em.
3 or 4 small ones. Meadowbrook for 200, Fletcher for 140, Lakeview 220, Long Lake Road 400, and then Mattawanakee Trail for 970. Are just what they did in their presentation when they made the presentation to the selectmen, the street scan
Thanks for
people.
sharing that.
So Foster Street is not a full reclamation, it's a lot of
Small pad.
smaller repairs, but they said it's a good bang for your buck. To do that, it's the next two roads that are croaking me. So I have to, trying to do some creative financing.
In the real discussion, the important discussion, I think, rather than which is the next road and when do we do it, is back in 2008 or 7, or whenever we did the...
Six.
6? The roads were rated at like a 74 out of 100, 73.8, 74 out of 100. They're now at 65.
We're going the other way.
So, even with the $1 million a year we're putting into it, we're sort of holding our own, but we're backsliding. So the question is, where are the selectmen, where is the town comfortable? Is a 70 a target, is a 65, everybody okay with a 65? I personally wouldn't be, but when I see...
If I'm living on that road, I wouldn't be very
Not
happy
right,
about it.
and I think
you know?
that's the point, if
But
there's a lot of
an-
people on the
That's an average
road,
of all the roads, right?
Right.
So some, like
Some are-
Nagog Hill, are
really terrible.
Really
Right,
bad.
right. And there are sections of Harwood that are horrible, but other sections
Yeah.
are fine. So, what do you do with that kind of thing? But I think the selectmen need to come to an agreement as to some guidance, where they think the town should be, and then we've got to figure out how do we try to fund it.
Well, once you get through some of those big roads,
I'm sorry?
once you get through some of the big roads, you'll be able to do a lot of smaller roads. with the
Well,
same kind of
that's
money.
what the list has, I think probably 5 or 6 of the roads are like $1 million plus projects, and then you've got 4 or 5 of them are less than $500,000. So for $1 million, you probably could knock 3 or 4 of them off, that kind of thing. So I don't know, it takes, I think, a lot of discussion to come up with a good plan, but I just make sure that it's on the agenda here so that we don't lose it.
Yeah.
Okay, we go with the budget discussion. The other thing that we really wanted to do tonight was to talk about and vote on the change in the, yeah, I know, it's getting late, right? The
Yeah, I gotta
policies
go
and
pick up
procedures.
Zoe.
What's that?
I have to get Zoe soon.
So I guess that means you're not prepared to talk about it and explain it and so on.
No, it's Steve and I need to both come down and,
Okay, well, it was on the agenda, so we should have had that taken care of.
yeah.
All right, if people haven't read it, if you could please read it by the next meeting, we'll have it in here, and we'll make sure Steve's here then, too.
Yeah.
Because we need to vote on that if we're going to use that as part of the budgeting process this year. Okay, and same with the TIF we don't have, the we've been going through all the TIF draft, just so you know what that is. So we've been talking every year, we have these TIFs and pilots come, and we always say, gee, we ought to have a process so we can say, yes, it qualifies, or no, it doesn't, so we have some boundaries to work on. So the Policies and Procedures Committee is just kind of taking the initiative to put something together, and has done a lot of the work, and Paula Vella did some work to go out and look what other towns have done and try to put it together. So you put some boundaries on, these are the priorities, maybe there's certain areas of town, or certain kind of buildings, or certain things. You say, these are the priorities, and then you somehow rank them and some other things. So that's the intent. So when one of these businesses comes and says, Jay, we'd like a TIF, that we have something that we start with, rather than them saying, this is what we want, and we have nothing to have the discussion with about.
Are we also looking at the way we subsidize the TIF? Because in the past, we kind of did this, well, we'll get you really low at first, and then it kind of hockey sticks up at the end. I'm trying to streamline.
Well, I mean, we can put anything in here we need to do. And some of it depends on what the business needs, what they're looking for, and.
Well, think about
Go ahead.
this, though. If you're a business and you've come in and you've got this great deal to be here for, I don't know, 15, 20 years, the first 10 years, it's at a really low rate, and then it starts to incrementally go up. When you get to that 15th or 20th year, you might think about leaving town.
Yeah.
Because it's up so high. Whereas if it was kind of leveled,
Yep.
it might be more of an incentive to stick around longer.
Stay around longer, yep. No,
a
makes
good
sense to
point.
me.
So I think, I've said that when I was on the Board of Selectmen, we shouldn't be doing TIFs where they ramp up, they should be more steady.
Yeah, and the pressure is raised on the towns because the state has backed off.
Right.
Because
Right.
it used to be the towns would give a small TIF, and the real benefit was for
state.
every employee, the state would give back
Give back some
a significant amount of money to the company for basically raising employment. The state has backed off on that, so the only piece of the pie now is the local cities and towns. So the investors are coming to the town saying, okay, what can I get from you to come to your town? So that's where the pressure
I
is.
think a TIF's a good thing in the right environment. It's just, the way we've done them in the past, I don't think they're,
Well, and that's the
They're good
purpose
for
of
the long
it,
term.
is to look at this and to put things like that in it, and even like why you do them. So for some places, the important thing is that somebody's here and they're bringing jobs. Well, that's probably not the priority for Littleton, quite frankly, right? I mean, we always want good jobs, but the jobs also may not be for people from Littleton, they could be from anywhere. So it may be just more this part of town, we have some old buildings and we'd like those revitalized and take better advantage of that and things like that. So
right,
different things to look at.
inventory to go through.
Yep.
I like your approach, Greg, but do you know if other townships are following suit?
That I don't know, but what I do know in the real estate world is that there are, outside of this particular area, that there are a lot of businesses that will move for tax incentives. They'll move. Well, GE's a
Absolutely. Right.
great point. I mean, they're coming to Boston. They're getting a tax incentive to do that. I
Sure.
don't know the particulars of the tax incentive, but anytime you have an incentive to move your business, you got to look at what that means. And if you're paying the same taxes all along and it's pretty steady, it's not as attractive to go somewhere else, whereas if you're way up here at the end because you gave them such a good deal to get in
Right.
early on, it's a no-brainer.
That's right.
Well, and the other thing is, we have the lowest electric rates in the state.
That's right.
Yeah, so if you're an electric hog, that's,
Yeah, I mean, you look at the nuclear power plant that it takes to keep IBM's building going up there. That's got to be worth it more than.
they've got to be coming to
what's
the end of
wrong.
their TIF, aren't they? Wasn't that through like 2017 or 2018, somewhere around there?
Well, it was 2006 or 7 when it started, and wasn't it?
20 years.
20?
Yeah,
Was it till?
Yeah. Because I was here, so.
but IBM's isn't that large because they get in under, they were one of the last companies that get in under the state.
Right.
You get down, the
If
potpourris.
you look at that one, that's a great example of a hockey stick with IBM, how
Right,
their
right.
their taxes are going to go up pretty dramatically towards the end of that
Right.
TIF.
Oh, yeah. The benefits down to minimal amounts.
Yeah,
But
So,
still, complete
anyway, food for thought.
taxes.
yeah, no, it's a good thought. All righty.
Okay. We can't do the minutes either because Marilyn didn't get the changes that I made. Somehow they didn't come through the way we did it, so we'll
What I
have
got
to.
from her
You
was
mean I
exactly
printed
what I
that out
had.
and stuff?
Oh, boy.
Oh, we're batting 50-50 on our agenda here today.
She got the original one, but I made changes and sent it back to her.
At Vegas, those are pretty good
Yeah,
odds.
and what I got back was exactly what I had, because Oh, but word for word.
Okay,
500, that's not that big.
Well,
That and the majors, you'd be making a lot of money.
It would be. I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
in favor? All
Aye.
right, thank you.
Do the flippity dip here?
In a week and a
flip the
half.
switchy.
No, Monday.